I would like to introduce our first speaker, and that's Bert Koenders. Bert Koenders is the chairman of the Foundation Max van der Stoel. He is also a chairman of the Advisory Council on the International Affairs and Special Envoy for the Fragility of the World Bank. Between 2014 and 2017, he was the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands, and he was also the Netherlands Minister for Development Cooperation. I'm continuing. He was also the UN Secretary General of the UN and a member of House of Representatives from 1997 to 2007. And prior to that, he have worked for the EU and the OECD. Yes, a very big applause for you. The stage is yours. You can stand here.
And I was very worried about the question because this is my 20th Africa Day. So I feel immediately out of control with a younger generation. But I think some traditions are very, very important to keep. And one is the Africa Day. So let me start by thanking everybody who is here today.
Yes.
This has been magnificent. And I'm very proud to chair the Max van der Stoel Foundation. As some of you might know, it came out of a big initiative to support and renew South-North relationships. And it was combined with an institute that dealt very much with democratization and change in Eastern Europe. And we put them together in the Max van der Stoel Foundation. Look, today, and some of you know that, so don't worry, I'm not going to do the Castro type of speech that I normally do. That's out of fashion, and we don't have the time for it. But I just wanted to mention, nevertheless, that this meeting is also specifically a meeting where I am feeling a lot of concern. A lot of concern about the issue that we are raising today, namely the issue of climate justice, of just transition, of ensuring actually that what we do, and try at least to do, in the Netherlands and in Europe, not enough, is to realize that when we talk about environmental change, about sustainability, about transition, it's also about equity. And the issue of international climate equity is absolutely key. I wanted to thank all the people who came from the diaspora and from Africa to exchange with us how we can go together in this area of a just transition. My second concern is obviously that we're doing this in a time of war in the Ukraine, of war in Gaza, but in war of many parts of Africa as well. I'm not sitting here this afternoon for a situation of Afro or Euro pessimism. I think what we saw today with the activists coming from Uganda, we'll listen to them a little bit later on, talking about oil refinery in Africa, where we were talking about the activists working on real energy-changing models of a different type, not a top-down, but a bottom-up movement to create work and value added and value change around the green economy in Africa. There's an enormous positive outlook. And I would like to congratulate that. I think that's what we support today. It's not only one that is very negative. There is an enormous amount of energy, but we have to link the two together. It doesn't take away in my view, that on the issue of climate justice, there are quite a few issues that I just wanted to touch in within the few minutes that I have. And for many of you, these are facts that you know much better than I. But let's not forget that most of the African and developing countries barely contributed to the problem. I was staggered again by, and I mentioned it this afternoon in another introduction, by the figures. The per capita emissions of the Netherlands are 40 times those of Tanzania. If you look to the countries in sub-Saharan Africa, the Netherlands has historically emitted more than all of these countries together. On January 8th every year, the rich countries have polluted, if you wish, as much as their fair share. So 8th February is very early in the year. It's not the 31st of December. And another telling statistics, the Netherlands' total emissions are larger than those of Nigeria, the largest African country, with a population of more than 200 million people. These are the facts. Contribution doesn't say yet about what we have to do, but it's important. I see you saying, yes, that's an important point to realize. Second, and all of you have their experiences, the climate crisis is in many countries now, not only in the small island and developing states around different parts of the world. you listen to the situation in Pakistan. I just was recently in Afghanistan, by the way, a country forgotten by many. And there's so many interests for the girls and women in that country. But the climate change is already now leading to a lot of issues around equity, around value, around value added, and around work. And I've myself worked for many years in West Africa. It's much too simple to say that climate change is the origin of conflict, but it's definitely catalyzing it. And the ethnicization of the conflict between the herders and the farmers definitely adds to a catalytic movement. So second, the consequences are very clear in the developing countries. But the third element, I think, is the most difficult. These are countries that still want to get out of poverty, want to create work, want to invest in health and in education. And especially the value adding of work is absolutely key. And how much does it cost? If you look now to the average African country, how can you finance this? Either by domestic resource mobilization, definitely, taxes. The second is by going either to the international public or private markets. The premium now, because of the interest rates that are so high, because of all the conflicts we have in the world, and the war with Russia, and the growth of interest rates, is a premium of almost 10% in median income countries. It's more expensive for them now to go into that green economy. And so they have to have a Faustian problem. We have an enormous debt overhang. What do? Do we invest in health, in education, in work, in types of growth that really create work for a whole lot of young people in the country? Or are we actually getting a chance also to invest in where we have a comparative advantage? Solar, hydro. I could mention so many others where the comparative advantage. It's impossible if you have these high prices. So we have here a triple problem: origin, consequences, and price. And I think that is where we have to work on and very much on the political side of it. Don't forget there are elections in this country next year, maybe not for everybody important. But it's quite interesting to see that even, and I'm not saying that this comes from traditional development cooperation only, but if we have one big party in this country basically saying we stop all financing of development cooperation, we stop the additionality of climate funds at the moment that it's crucial, please be on our side. I'm not here to give just a political speech, but there are choices to be made in each country on this. We need additionality. We have to deal with our promises. We have an enormous problem with lack of, I would say, credibility in many countries in the global south. That has to do with double standards and understandable issues. I remember very well that when we were having the issue around gas dependency and energy dependency from Russia, we all at once rushed to the countries that we said don't invest in fossil fuels because we needed it ourselves. So we have to get out of the hypocrisy. We have to get into more equitable partnerships. And we have to make sure that we take very, very specific proposals to make sure that at the COP, with a new Dutch government, but especially with many African and European governments, I'm sure, Diederik, you can say much about it, you're at the heart of this battle, that we make this a big proposal and an advantage. And again, I say this is not only a black story. I mean black in the terms of negative. There is light at the end of the tunnel. And I just wanted to say that except for this whole issue of development cooperation, modernization, public and private goods, let's align ourselves to some of the magnificent ideas. One is the reform of the international financial institutions. We need 1 trillion of investments. That sounds tremendous for green energy and green support in many of the African countries. Maybe more for adaptation as well, but also for mitigation. There is an enormous possibility now, it's not easy, that we shorten our value chains. And when we're talking about in Europe about strategic autonomy, why not a little bit more with Africa? Yes, there is an unequal starting position, but there is also a possibility in many of the area, critical raw materials, in terms of food, in terms of agriculture, where there would be a possibility of much more equitable partnerships. And I would like just to call for that today as well. Last but not least, and then I stop, otherwise it becomes Castro, and there's so many good speakers after that, except for finance, except for professionalization, we have killed basically the knowledge of water and agriculture in our departments, in the Foreign Office and elsewhere. Let's reinvest in that. But except for capital flows and knowledge here, it is important, except for these big international financial changes that we need, and I think the new Dutch government should support this. It's one of the last chances. We live in a time of polarization, of war, of disenchantment of many countries in the global south. This is now an issue where we could work together. I really believe that. And I think it's important to say the last point, 2040. You know, one of my successors was Wopke Hoekstra. I think some of us even work for him today. He became all at once the radical. You remember, you saw him in the European Parliament. 2040, we have to get the goals earlier. I think we should be inspired by him, isn't it? Let us being inspired by Wopke Hoekstra. I would never think I would say that. But let's say do it in 2040, because if you want others to have a possibility also to develop and to cooperate, we have to be slightly early. I want to end with that. This is a movement of not looking at the situation in bleak terms, but it's very urgent. There is a COP, there are elections. It's a time to change and make climate justice the first and foremost area of our concern in the next couple of months. Thank you very much.